The sun beats down mercilessly on the backs of thousands as they haul massive stone blocks across the desert, their muscles straining under the weight of history itself. This is the Great Pyramid of Giza rising, one of the most astonishing feats of human labor ever accomplished. But here's what Hollywood never shows you. The real secret behind these Herculean efforts wasn't magic or enslaved masses, it was something far more ordinary, yet utterly surprising. The fuel that powered these ancient workers wasn't just brute strength, it was their food. Think about it. How could people laboring under the scorching Egyptian sun for decades have built monuments that still stand today without proper nourishment? Forget the Hollywood tropes of half-starved slaves surviving on scraps. Archaeological discoveries reveal a truth so unexpected, it rewrites everything we thought we knew. These workers weren't just fed, they were fed well, with diets carefully designed to sustain their monumental task. Bread so abundant it doubled as currency, fish from the Nile packed with protein, even beer brewed thick with nutrients. But the details, they're stranger than fiction. So what exactly did these ancient builders eat to keep going? How did their meals compare to the pharaoh's feasts we always hear about? And why does this humble truth change how we see the pyramids, and the people who built them, forever? Strap in, because we're peeling back the layers of time to reveal the plates, the portions, and the priceless role food played in shaping history. This isn't just about ancient diets, it's about the humanity behind the stones. And trust me, by the end, you'll never look at a pyramid or a loaf of bread the same way again. Picture this: a worker's morning in ancient Egypt, long before the sun reached its peak. The first thing reaching their lips wasn't water, but beer. Not the thin, bubbly drink we know today, but a thick, porridge-like brew so packed with nutrients it could power hours of back-breaking labor. And that was just breakfast. The real staple, the backbone of every meal, came from the golden fields along the Nile, emmer, wheat, and barley. These grains didn't just fill stomachs, they built pyramids. Archaeological digs at worker settlements like those near Giza reveal staggering numbers: 70 to 80% of their daily calories came from these humble crops. But turning grain into food was no simple task. Harvesting emmer wheat meant battling its tough husk, a far cry from modern wheat. Workers would painstakingly parch the grains over fire, then pound them with stone mortar and pestle just to loosen the inedible outer layer. Winnowing followed, tossing the crushed grain into the air so the wind could carry away the chaff. Only then could baking begin, and oh, the bread, flat, dense loaves baked in ash-covered clay molds, some still preserved in tombs today. These weren't the fluffy slices we're used to, they were hearty, gritty, and sometimes even contained sand from the grinding process, leaving traces of wear on ancient teeth. Yet this bread was so vital it doubled as wages. Laborers at Deir el-Medina, the village of pyramid artisans, received daily bread rations as payment: 10 loaves per man, with extra for supervisors. But here's where it gets fascinating. That same grain didn't just become bread, it became beer. Far from a recreational drink, this was liquid sustenance, a calorie-dense solution for workers under the burning sun. Brewers mashed partially baked bread into water, letting fermentation work its magic. The result? A cloudy, nutrient-rich drink so thick it had to be strained through cloth before drinking. Some tombs even show scenes of straws being used to avoid the sludge at the bottom. Think about the genius of it, a workforce powered by bread and beer, both made from the same precious harvest. It wasn't luxury, it was practicality. Grain stored well in Egypt's dry climate, and its transformation into two staple foods created a fail-safe system. When bread ran short, beer could fill the gap, and vice versa. This wasn't just diet, it was ancient engineering, a nutritional blueprint for endurance. Every loaf baked, every vat of beer brewed, was another stone lifted toward the sky. Bread in ancient Egypt wasn't just sustenance, it was a cultural masterpiece, a medical mystery, and a testament to human ingenuity. Imagine walking into a bakery along the Nile 4,000 years ago. Instead of a single bland loaf, you'd face a dizzying menu over 30 distinct types, each with its own texture, ingredient, and purpose. Hieroglyphs and tomb paintings reveal loaves sweetened with dates and honey for temple offerings, dense barley rounds studded with figs for soldiers on the march, and even ceremonial bread shaped like animals for religious rituals. But the bread-fueling pyramid builders told a darker story. Workers' loaves, excavated from settlement ruins, contained more than grain. They held traces of desert sand, tiny stone fragments from grinding, even occasional grit from poorly cleaned milling equipment. Forensic studies of laborers' mummies show the brutal toll: teeth worn down to the roots, abscesses from constant irritation, jawbones scarred by infection. These weren't just snacks, they were survival rations, packed with enough calories to haul 2-ton stones, yet abrasive enough to slowly grind teeth into dust. Yet even this grit bread had purpose. The same sand that damaged teeth may have helped mill flour faster on coarse stone querns, a tragic trade-off between efficiency and health. And surprisingly, some workers' remains show less damage than others. Why? Hierarchy on the pyramid site extended all the way to the bakery. Foremen and skilled artisans received finer sifted flour, while laborers at the bottom got the grittiest loaves. The most astonishing discovery: bread's role went beyond the physical. Medical papyri prescribe moldy bread as poultices for wounds, an accidental forerunner of antibiotics. Ovens found near work sites suggest bread was baked fresh daily to prevent spoilage in the heat. Even the act of breaking bread wove communities together. Tomb art shows workers sharing loaves, a moment of camaraderie amidst the backbreaking labor. So next time you bite into soft modern bread, remember, those dense sandy loaves built civilization. Every crumb held the weight of empires and the resilience of the people who baked them. Now imagine a drink so essential it blurred the line between meal and medicine: ancient Egyptian beer, the original power beverage. This wasn't some fermented folly that left workers stumbling under the pyramids. Chemical analysis of 1,000-year-old brewery residues tells a different story. A carefully crafted, low-alcohol brew hovering around 3 to 4% weaker than most modern lagers, but packed with enough calories and nutrients to fuel a workforce. The secret brewers weren't just tossing grain into vats. Crushed dates and figs found embedded in ancient beer residues reveal a deliberate touch of sweetness, not just for flavor but for energy. Think of it like a prehistoric sports drink: electrolytes replaced by natural sugars and B vitamins from fermentation. Workers drinking this weren't getting drunk, they were getting an efficient calorie boost. A single jar could deliver nearly 500 calories, with proteins and carbohydrates from the suspended grain solids. Tomb paintings even show workers sipping through straws to avoid the sediment, a practical solution, not a party trick. And here's the twist: this beer was safer than Nile water. Fermentation killed harmful bacteria, making it a hygienic choice in a land where dysentery could cripple a workforce. Temples ran breweries like factories, scaling production to feed thousands. At the workers' village of Hayt el Ghurab near Giza, archaeologists uncovered a brewery capable of churning out over 1,000 gallons daily, enough to keep a small army of laborers hydrated and fed. But the real genius was in the timing. Workers drank beer in measured rations throughout the day, maintaining energy without the crash of a heavy meal. Morning jars provided a slow burn of calories for hauling stones. Midday sips warded off dehydration under the desert sun. Even the alcohol played a role, not enough to impair, but sufficient to ease the aches of relentless labor. This wasn't indulgence, it was bioengineering before the word existed. So forget the myth of drunk builders fumbling with pyramid blocks, that beer jar in an artisan's hand. It was as calculated as the architect's blueprint, a lifeline woven into the very rhythm of construction. Every sip carried the weight of progress, proving once again that history's greatest wonders were built not on vice, but on ingenuity. While bread and beer fueled the workers' endurance, another crucial ingredient often overlooked in the shadow of the pyramids was swimming right beneath their feet, the fish of the Nile. Stretching nets across its fertile waters, ancient Egyptians hauled in a staggering bounty, Nile perch so large they dwarfed modern catches, catfish thick with protein-rich flesh, and schools of mullet so plentiful their silver scales glittered like coins in the sunlight. Archaeologists sifting through worker settlements near Giza have uncovered mountains of fish bones, some sites revealing more than 300,000 remains, a testament to just how central fish was to the pyramid builders' diet. But here's the puzzle: fish wasn't just food, it was a cultural contradiction. Religious texts warned against certain species, associating them with chaos gods like Seth. Priests avoided fish altogether during temple rituals, yet for laborers, taboos bent under practical needs, workers couldn't afford to shun a protein source this abundant. So they developed ingenious preservation methods to keep fish edible in the desert heat. Some were gutted and sun-dried into stiff planks, lightweight and durable, perfect for stuffing into a worker's satchel. Others underwent fermentation, mashed with salt into a pungent, garum-like sauce that could last months. Jars of this fish paste found in worker villages suggest it was slathered onto bread or stirred into stews, packing a salty, umami punch that broke the monotony of grain-heavy meals. The real surprise: hierarchy again dictated the plate. Forensic analysis shows laborers closest to the Nile got fresher fish, while those deeper inland ate more preserved varieties. Some worker mummies even reveal traces of parasitic infections from undercooked catches, a grim reminder that hunger often overruled caution. Yet without this protein boost, the pyramids might never have risen. Fish provided essential amino acids missing from bread and beer, repairing muscles torn by hauling stones. Tomb paintings hint at fish's cultural weight too, showing fishermen offering their catch to officials, not as tribute, but as proof of their role in feeding the empire's backbone. So next time you picture pyramid builders, imagine them pausing at midday, unwrapping a dried perch from linen, or dipping gritty bread into a fermented fish sauce. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked, and in that balance between taboo and necessity, the Nile's bounty became the unsung hero of history's greatest construction project. Tomb paintings dazzle with scenes of fattened cattle offered to gods and pharaohs, but for the pyramid builders, meat was no everyday luxury. While elites feasted on beef, a symbol of wealth so precious it was literally called the god's flesh, laborers made do with humbler cuts. Excavations at worker settlements tell the real story: piles of butchered goat and pig bones, carefully split to extract every scrap of marrow. These weren't daily meals, this was festival food, a rare protein windfall maybe once every 10 days. But why this meat hierarchy? Cows demanded precious pasture along the Nile, making them living status symbols. Goats and pigs, though, they thrived on scraps. Swine especially prospered, wallowing in village outskirts eating garbage. Archaeologists tracking butchery marks found pork ribs and goat legs chopped into identical portions, evidence of systemic rationing. Workers didn't just get meat, they got standardized shares, likely distributed as rewards for meeting construction milestones. The contrast between tomb art and reality couldn't be starker. One funerary scene at Saqqara shows a noble's table piled with beef haunches, but dig through the trash heaps of pyramid builders and you'll find bones boiled repeatedly for broth until they crumbled. Yet even this scarcity had purpose. Protein-packed pork fat may have helped workers absorb fat-soluble vitamins from their grain-heavy diet, preventing deficiencies. And when meat did come, it was cooked with care. Clay pots found near worker barracks still bear traces of slow-cooked stews, herbs and garlic clinging to the edges. Here's what those bones don't show: hunger. Unlike Hollywood's starving slaves, these workers received calculated protein boosts timed to sustain their labor. A pig slaughtered during the inundation season meant fresh meat, When farm work paused and pyramid construction surged, goat bones snapped for marrow suggest workers extracted every possible nutrient. This wasn't starvation, it was strategic rationing on an industrial scale. So next time you see a tomb painting of lavish beef offerings, remember, the real feast wasn't on the walls. It was in the hands of workers sharing a communal pot, savoring each rare, flavorful bite, knowing tomorrow it was back to bread and beer. That humility, that shared moment, built more than pyramids. It built a civilization. Beneath the towering shadows of the pyramids, another revolution was taking place, one fueled not by stone, but by soil. While bread and beer dominated the workers' diet, the humble vegetables of ancient Egypt played a role so vital, their absence would have collapsed the entire system. Take onions, for instance, bulbs so cherished they were buried with pharaohs as eternal provisions. Workers didn't just eat them, they relied on them. Crunching raw onions under the desert sun wasn't just about flavor, it was a survival tactic. Packed with vitamin C, these pungent bulbs staved off scurvy, a silent threat in a grain-heavy diet. Tomb paintings at Deir el-Medina reveal baskets of onions stacked like currency, exchanged as part of daily rations alongside bread and fish. Then there's garlic, the ancient superfood. Workers chewed cloves raw, not just to repel parasites, though that was a bonus, but for its stamina-boosting properties. Modern studies confirm what the Egyptians knew instinctively. Garlic's sulfur compounds enhance oxygen efficiency, a game-changer for laborers hauling blocks under the scorching sun. Archaeologists have found garlic traces in the dental plaque of worker mummies, proof that this wasn't occasional seasoning, it was medicine masquerading as food. But the real unsung heroes, leeks, often overshadowed by their allium cousins, these were the multitaskers of the ancient kitchen. Sliced thin and eaten fresh, they provided folate, a nutrient critical for cell repair in bodies battered by manual labor. Workers' settlements near Luxor show evidence of leeks grown in small garden plots, suggesting they weren't just centrally distributed but locally cultivated, a grassroots insurance policy against hunger. And let's not forget legumes, the protein powerhouses that bridged the gap when meat was scarce. Lentils and peas, boiled into thick stews, offered a plant-based protein boost that kept muscles functioning. At the workers' village of Deir el-Medina, tomb art depicts scribes meticulously recording lentil distributions, each portion calculated like a paycheck. Some broken pottery fragments still bear the residue of these meals, carbonized remains of pea and lentil soups, thickened with emmer wheat for extra heft. What's striking is how these foods transcended nutrition. Onion skins found in burial sites suggest they were used as dyes for workers' clothing. Lentil husks appear in ancient medical texts as poultices for eye infections. Even the act of sharing a communal pot of leek stew fostered camaraderie, a reminder that these weren't just calories, but threads in the social fabric that held the workforce together. So the next time you chop an onion or stir a pot of lentils, remember, these weren't just sideshows to history. They were the quiet, indispensable partners to bread and beer, the vitamins, the proteins, the resilience in edible form. Without them, the pyramids might still be dreams in the sand. When the desert sun reached its fiercest point, pyramid builders reached for nature's perfect energy bar dates. These sticky, sugary fruits weren't just sweet treats, they were lifelines. Workers' settlements near Giza have yielded date pits by the thousands, some still bearing tooth marks where laborers gnawed every last shred of flesh. The genius of dates lay in their chemistry, packed with potassium to prevent muscle cramps, fiber to sustain energy, and simple sugars for instant fuel. But here's what's remarkable: these weren't foraged snacks. Archaeologists have uncovered clay tokens in administrative ruins, each stamped with hieroglyphs denoting specific fruit rations, proof of a bureaucratic system ensuring every worker got their share. Figs played an equally clever role. Unlike dates eaten fresh, Figs were often sun-dried into chewy slabs, their natural sugars concentrating into portable power packs. Workers could tuck these into their linen belts, eating them mid-task without stopping. Tomb paintings at Beni Hassan show figs piled in baskets alongside grain sacks, suggesting they were distributed as part of official rations. And the science backs this up. Isotope analysis of worker remains reveals higher fruit sugar traces than expected, hinting that figs weren't occasional indulgences but calculated calorie boosts during the most grueling construction phases. Then there were the melons, not the juicy watermelons we know today, but smaller, denser varieties cultivated in desert oases. These were sliced and dried into leathery strips, their crisp sweetness preserved for months. At the workers' village of Hayt el-Ghurab, archaeologists found melon seeds mixed with barley in storage jars, suggesting they were added to bread dough for extra nutrition. But melons had a hidden advantage. Their high water content, retained even when dried, helped combat dehydration in workers who spent hours under the sun without stopping to drink. The real surprise: how far these fruits traveled. Palm groves in distant oases like Bahariya supplied dates to pyramid sites, their transport orchestrated by the state. Broken clay labels from storehouses list fruit shipments alongside stone and timber, proving dates and figs were treated as critical construction supplies, not luxuries. Workers even used date palm fibers for rope and fig tree sap as glue, ensuring nothing went to waste. So next time you bite into a date, imagine a pyramid builder doing the same 4,000 years ago. That burst of energy wasn't just personal, it was part of a meticulously planned system, where every sweet, sticky bite lifted another stone toward eternity. Hidden in the cracked remains of ancient clay pots, archaeologists uncovered a silent revolution: dairy. While pharaohs sipped cow's milk as a luxury, pyramid workers relied on something humbler but no less vital: goat and sheep milk. Residue analysis from worker settlements reveals milk fats clinging to pottery shards, their chemical fingerprints telling a story of ingenuity. These weren't just drinks, they were early superfoods, packed with calcium to strengthen bones, hauling limestone blocks and protein to repair muscles shredded by ropes and ramps. But milk posed a problem in the scorching heat spoilage. The solution: cheese. Near the Giza Plateau, excavators found peculiar clay vessels riddled with tiny holes. These weren't defective pots, they were ancient cheese strainers used to separate curds from whey. Tomb paintings at Saqqara show workers pressing cheese into molds, salting the discs to preserve them. The result: a portable, protein-dense snack that could last for weeks, perfect for laborers who couldn't return to their homes for fresh meals. Here's where it gets fascinating. Some cheese residues tested positive for bacteria similar to modern kefir, hinting at intentional fermentation. Workers might have consumed a tangy, probiotic-rich cheese that bolstered gut health, critical when working in crowded, dusty conditions. And the distribution was ruthlessly efficient. At Deir el-Medina, ration lists carved into limestone detail cheese allocations by rank. 4 men received larger wheels, while laborers got smaller portions, each measured to match their caloric needs. Yet dairy's brilliance lay in its versatility. Milk could be turned into cheese when fresh, or fermented into yogurt like Laban for immediate consumption. Broken bones from worker cemeteries show fewer signs of osteoporosis than expected, a testament to steady calcium intake. Even the containers mattered. Porous clay milk jars, when soaked in water, created evaporative cooling, keeping contents fresh longer, so forget the image of milk as a pampered elite's drink. Those humble goat cheeses and clay strainers, they were the unsung tools of empire, turning scattered herds into concentrated energy. Every bite of cheese wasn't just food, it was another block lifted, another pyramid inch closer to the sky. Digging through the ashes of long, cold hearths near the pyramid sites, archaeologists made a startling discovery: tiny seeds that shouldn't have been there. Cumin, coriander, even traces of cinnamon, all nestled in the cracks of workers' cooking pots. These weren't just accidental flavors, they were evidence of a spice trade stretching hundreds of miles, reaching even the humblest laborers. Imagine the scene. After a grueling day hauling stones, workers gathered around fires, inhaling the earthy aroma of cumin-toasted fish or coriander-spiked lentil stew. This wasn't survival food, it was cuisine with intention, proof that even pyramid builders savored more than just calories. The real shocker, these spices weren't local. Coriander seeds found at Giza worker camps matched varieties grown in the Levant, while cumin traces linked to Anatolian sources. How did they get there? State-sponsored supply chains, the same networks that delivered Lebanese cedar for temple doors. But here's the twist: workers weren't just passive recipients. Excavated tablets from administrative buildings list spice rations distributed as incentives, like bonus pay for meeting construction targets. A handful of cumin could mean the difference between a bland gruel and a meal worth remembering. Then there was the salt, not the refined white powder we know, but coarse crystals harvested from the shores of the delta or scraped from desert salt flats. Workers used it pragmatically, rubbing it into fish to prevent spoilage, sprinkling it over bread for flavor, but also ritually. Tomb inscriptions mention salt of the north, given to laborers during festivals, a symbolic gesture linking their sweat to the preservative power of sodium. Even natron, the mineral used to mummify pharaohs, doubled as a worker's seasoning. Residue on cooking pots shows it was added to beer for a tangy kick, a humble echo of its sacred use. What's most telling is the contrast. While elites flaunted imported spices as status symbols, workers wielded them as tools: cumin to mask the taste of preserved meat, garlic and salt to replenish electrolytes lost in sweat. A broken pot found near the Sphinx still bears finger smears of a cumin fig paste, someone's attempt to make gritty bread palatable. These flavors did more than tickle taste buds. They stitched together a workforce from dozens of regions, creating a shared culinary language. So forget everything you've heard about monotonous ancient diets. Those spice stains on a laborer's clay cup, they're the real hieroglyphs telling a story of resilience and the universal human craving for something more than mere sustenance. Those broken pottery shards covered in scribbled hieroglyphs might look like trash, but they're actually some of history's first pay stubs. Ostraka, the ancient equivalent of scrap paper, where accountants meticulously recorded what kept the pyramids standing: worker rations. At Deir el-Medina, the artisan village near Luxor, archaeologists have pieced together a precise nutritional ledger: 10 loaves of bread, 2 jugs of beer, a bundle of onions or leeks, plus occasional fish or cheese. This wasn't just food, it was currency calculated down to the crumb. These quantities weren't arbitrary. Modern calorie estimates reveal each worker consumed between 3,000 to 4,000 calories daily, a staggering amount tailored to their brutal workload. But here's what those numbers hide: the sheer bureaucracy behind every meal. Scribes didn't just tally loaves, they graded them. Ostraka specify bread quality by hieratic script: good, ordinary, or coarse, reflecting a rigid hierarchy. Foremen received loaves sifted free of sand, while laborers got the grittier batches. Beer jugs came marked with volume lines, ensuring no cheated servings. Even onions were counted by size: large ones for senior builders, small for apprentices. This wasn't generosity, it was cold, calculated efficiency. A well-fed workforce moved stones faster, and the state knew it. The real genius: flexibility. During the Nile's annual flood, when farm labor paused and construction surged, rations swelled: extra fish doubled beer rations. Conversely, lean months saw substitutions: lentils replaced meat, dates supplemented grain. One Ostrakan from year 17 of Ramses Roman III reign even records a temporary cut to 8 loaves per worker, with a scribbled note blaming low harvests. Yet workers didn't starve, the system adapted, proving these weren't handouts but contractual obligations. And then there's the dark side. Some ostraca list deductions -1 loaf for absence or half ration for illness. Workers could bank unused rations or trade them, evidenced by notes like, Thamos swaps 3 bread loaves for 1 wool tunic, but penalties were brutal. A papyrus from Thebes details a crew striking when rations were late history's first recorded labor protest. The response, double rations the next day, then a swift tax hike to recoup costs. Yet within this rigid system, humanity peeked through. One pottery fragment preserves a scribe's doodle, a smiling worker holding an oversized loaf. Another lists a birthday bonus, extra beer for a carpenter named Knack. These weren't just numbers, they were lives. Every crumb of bread, every sip of beer, carried the weight of an empire and the defiance, ingenuity, and resilience of the people who built it. At the height of the pyramid's construction, while laborers gnawed on gritty bread and fish paste, pharaohs dined on a culinary spectacle worthy of gods. Recent chemical analysis of royal kitchen pottery tells a startling tale: residues of gazelle meat, wild duck, even tender cuts of Nile perch so fresh they must have been delivered live to the palace. These weren't just meals, they were edible power displays. Where workers received standard issue beer, pharaohs sipped wine imported from the Levant, its tart grape traces still detectable in the pores of thousand-year-old jugs. The divide went deeper than ingredients. While workers' settlements show evidence of mass-produced clay cookware, royal kitchens used polished limestone bowls that kept food chilled, an ancient version of refrigeration. Archaeologists found traces of fenugreek and saffron in these vessels, spices so rare they appear in temple offering lists alongside gold and incense. One fragmented wine label from Amenhotep III's reign even specifies the vintage. Year 31, very good quality, Western River region. But here's what's fascinating: the science reveals how these diets impacted bodies differently. Bone analysis shows workers had stronger, denser skeletons from constant labor, while royalty suffered from cavities and gout, side effects of sugar-laden honeycakes and fatty meats. Yet worker teeth show more wear from coarse grains, while pharaoh's teeth, though decayed, were polished smooth from fine flour. Even feasting styles reflected hierarchy. Tomb paintings depict workers eating quickly, squatting near work sites, while royal banquets sprawled for hours with musicians and dancers. A single relief at Medinet Habu shows Ramses III's table piled with 15 types of bread, each fluffier than the last, while ration lists from Giza record workers receiving just one gritty variety. Perhaps most telling is the evidence of waste. Workers' trash heaps contain fish bones gnawed clean, fractured to extract marrow, royal garbage, half-eaten quail carcasses, their meat barely touched, a deliberate wastefulness proving status. This wasn't just about taste, it was edible theater, every bite proclaiming, "I don't need to finish this." Yet in one respect, workers held the advantage. Their balanced diet of grains, fish, and vegetables kept them surprisingly healthy compared to the malnourished elite, who often overdosed on rich foods. The very bread that wore down workers' teeth kept their muscles strong enough to outlast the kings they buried. Walk through the ruins of a pyramid workers' village, and you'll stumble upon structures that look like giant beehives dotting the landscape, communal clay ovens, their interiors blackened by centuries of relentless flames. These weren't just cooking devices, they were the pulsating hearts of daily life. Archaeologists mapping the soot patterns inside these domed ovens have uncovered a rhythm as precise as any construction timeline. The thickest layers cluster near the base, where emmer wheat loaves baked directly on hot clay surfaces, while higher up, the stains thin out evidence of stacked ceramic jars simmering lentil stews for hours. The design was pure practicality. Built from Nile mud mixed with straw, these ovens trapped heat like modern Dutch ovens, circulating warmth evenly so every scrap of fuel, often dried animal dung or salvaged wood, burned efficiently. Workers didn't have the luxury of wasting resources. At Deir el Medina, excavations revealed ovens positioned strategically between housing blocks, their placement minimizing walking distance for tired laborers returning from the worksite. But here's what's ingenious: the ovens operated like a prehistoric meal prep system. Pre-dawn firings produced the day's bread, with workers taking shifts to knead dough on stone slabs nearby. By mid-morning, as temperatures peaked, the same ovens transitioned to slow cooking. Ceramic jars, their rounded bases nestled into ash beds, held stews of fish, lentils, and onions, ingredients that would toughen over direct flame but softened into digestible meals with gentle, prolonged heat. Residue analysis shows some pots even had internal ridges, designed to prevent scorching when stirred with wooden paddles. The social role of these ovens can't be overstated. Unlike the isolated kitchens of elites, these were communal hubs. Tomb sketches depict workers gathered around them, some warming hands after chilly desert nights, others exchanging gossip while waiting for loaves. A broken ostracon from Gezer records a complaint about a man who took more than his share of oven space, hinting at tensions over this shared resource. Yet the ovens also reveal adaptability. During the Nile's flood season, when fish were plentiful, soot patterns shift more jars, less bread, reflecting a protein-heavy diet for intensive labor. In drier months, the opposite: thicker bread layers, fewer stew pots as grains dominated. Even failures tell stories. One collapsed oven at Height El Ghurab preserved a charred loaf inside, its uneven rise suggesting a distracted baker, maybe someone called away to an emergency at the worksite. These ovens didn't just feed bodies, they sustained a system. Every scorch mark, every pottery fragment, whispers the same truth. The pyramids weren't built on empty stomachs, but on the steady, smoky hum of communal fires that turned raw ingredients into the energy of empires. Now let's talk numbers, the kind that make modern supply chains shudder. Picture a workforce of 4,000 laborers, each needing enough food to fuel the equivalent of a daily marathon under the desert sun. The math is staggering: 12,000 loaves of bread and 2,400 gallons of beer every single day. That's enough bread to stack higher than the pyramid's base and enough beer to fill a small lake over the course of decades. But here's the real wonder: none of this happened by chance. The Egyptian state didn't just feed its workers, it industrialized their hunger. State-run bakeries operated like ancient assembly lines. At the workers' village of Height El Ghurab near Giza, archaeologists uncovered a bakery complex capable of churning out thousands of loaves daily. The setup was ruthlessly efficient: grain silos positioned for easy access, grinding stations with rows of saddle querns where laborers crushed emmer wheat in shifts, and massive clay ovens fueled by a constant supply of dried reeds and dung. The bread wasn't baked in small batches, it was produced in industrial quantities, with some ovens large enough to hold 50 loaves at once. Workers even developed a quality control system: stamped loaves marked with hieroglyphs indicating baker teams, so undercooked or gritty batches could be traced back to their source. But bread was only half the equation. Breweries ran with similar precision. At Hierakonpolis, excavations revealed a facility capable of producing 300 gallons per batch, and they weren't alone. Dozens of these breweries dotted the Nile, strategically placed near construction sites. The process was a marvel of proto-engineering. Partially baked bread crumbled into vats, mixed with Nile water, and left to ferment in precise temperatures. The resulting beer wasn't just brewed, it was standardized. Chemical analysis of residue from different sites shows strikingly similar alcohol and nutrient content, proof of a centralized recipe. The logistics behind distribution would impress even modern planners. Donkey caravans hauled grain from fertile delta farms to desert work sites, while scribes tracked every sack with hieratic notations on clay tablets. At the pyramid's base, food stalls operated like ancient food trucks, dispensing rations by trade. Quarrymen received extra bread for their strenuous labor, while painters got smaller but more frequent beer portions to keep their hands steady. Even the timing was calculated. Morning rations delivered before dawn, second meals timed to coincide with the day's most grueling shifts. What's truly astonishing is the adaptability. When drought struck during Pepi II's reign, ration tablets show breweries switching to dates as a fermentation substitute. When a sandstorm blocked supply routes, workers' villages temporarily shifted to fish-heavy diets, proven by sudden spikes in bone deposits. This wasn't just food production, it was a living, responsive system, as finely tuned as the pyramid's own geometry. So next time you bite into a sandwich, consider this. 4,000 years ago, an entire civilization ran on a nutritional blueprint so advanced, it turned bread and beer into the literal building blocks of history. Every loaf baked, every vat brewed was a logistical triumph, one that didn't just fill stomachs but moved mountains. The rhythm of the Nile wasn't just poetry, it was a dietary calendar etched into the bones of pyramid builders. When summer's floodwaters swelled, transforming the river into a silver highway, workers' trash heaps tell the story, sudden explosions of fish bones, some piles reaching waist-high. Archaeologists sifting through these layers can pinpoint the season by the species Nile perch dominant in early flood months, clusters of catfish vertebrae as waters peaked. But this wasn't just abundance, it was a nutritional pivot. With fields underwater and farming paused, the state redirected labor to construction, flooding work sites with protein. Fish butchery marks changed to hasty chopping in summer, when daily catches overwhelmed preservation capacity, versus careful filleting in drier months when every scrap mattered. Come winter, as the Nile retreated, those same garbage layers shift dramatically, fish bones dwindle, replaced by cracked grain husks and the telltale shards of storage jars. This was the season of bread and beer, when the harvest's bounty, carefully stockpiled in granaries during flood season, became the workforce's lifeline. But here's the clever part, workers didn't just switch from fish to grain, they layered them. Isotope analysis of winter-deposited bones reveals traces of dried fish in workers' diets, proving the state preserved summer's surplus as salted strips or fermented paste. A single jar found at Giza contained fish packed in salt, so thick it formed a crust, still clinging to the remains after 4,000 years, the real genius. How these seasonal shifts synchronized with construction phases. Summer's fish surge coincided with the heaviest labor quarrying and hauling stone, when cooler river breezes made brutal work slightly bearable. Winter's carb-heavy rations, meanwhile, fueled precision tasks like block fitting and carving, where sustained energy outweighed raw strength. Even the trash tells this story. Summer heaps near ramps show gnawed-fish spines tossed hastily between shifts, while winter deposits by carving stations reveal breadcrumbs mixed with powdered stone, workers eating mid-task without dropping tools. But the most poignant evidence comes from teeth. Skeletal remains from workers buried in different seasons show distinct wear patterns. Summer burials with teeth worn from gritty bread but strong bones from fish protein, winter burials with less dental damage but more signs of scurvy, suggesting gaps in fresh food. The state wasn't perfect, but it adapted. At a workers' cemetery near Luxor, grave goods shift with the seasons too. Summer burials include fishing hooks, winter ones contain miniature grain sacks, perhaps a humble plea for eternal rations. This wasn't just survival, it was a dance with nature's cycles, a testament to how the Nile's heartbeat powered not just farms, but the very hands that built eternity. Every fish bone in summer, every grain husk in winter, whispers the same truth. The pyramids rose not in spite of nature's rhythm, but because of it. Digging through the mud-brick ruins of Avaris, the ancient Hyksos capital, archaeologists stumbled upon a culinary revolution hidden in plain sight pork bones, piled high in trash pits marked with Syrian-style butchery cuts. This wasn't just another worker's meal. It was proof of a multicultural kitchen where foreign laborers reshaped Egypt's foodways from the ground up, while native Egyptian workers near the pyramids avoided pork for religious reasons. These Syrian builders at Avaris reveled in it. Their settlements tell the tale, pig bones outnumbering cattle 3-1, charred remnants of olive pits in cooking fires, even clay jars lined with residues of imported oils, ingredients utterly alien to traditional Egyptian rations. The evidence is etched into teeth and trash. Isotope analysis of Syrian workers' remains shows significantly higher levels of pork protein compared to their Egyptian counterparts at Giza. Butchery marks tell an even clearer story. Shoulder cuts favored in Levantine cuisine, ribs scored for slow roasting over open flames. These weren't accidental imports, they were deliberate cultural choices. One particularly telling find: a brick-lined pit near worker barracks crammed with over 2,000 pig bones, all from young animals slaughtered at peak tenderness, proof of specialized husbandry catering to foreign tastes. Yet the real shocker was the olive oil. Residue tests on storage jars revealed traces of oils matching chemical signatures from ancient Canaan. For Egyptians, olive oil was a luxury item, reserved for temples and elites. But here, in the hands of laborers, it appeared mixed into stews and spread on bread. A broken ostracon from the site lists 3 jars of sweet oil, issued to a Syrian work gang, likely payment bonuses for meeting construction targets. The implications are staggering. Foreign workers weren't just feeding themselves, they were importing entire culinary traditions, transforming state rations into something distinctly their own. Even the cooking methods diverged. While Egyptians baked bread in communal ovens, Syrian sites show small, domed clay tandirs, portable ovens perfect for roasting meats and flatbreads. Archaeologists found one still containing charred bits of garlic-rubbed pork, its fat preserved in the cracked clay. Nearby, a grinding stone bore traces of cumin and coriander, spices common in Levantine cuisine but rare in Egyptian workers' settlements. The hierarchy of taste went deeper than ingredients. At Avaris, pig bones appear in both worker areas and administrative buildings, suggesting Syrian foodways crossed class lines. But Egyptian overseers left their own fingerprints literally. Seal impressions on oil jars show Egyptian hieroglyphs beside Canaanite script, a bureaucratic dance between supply and demand. One papyrus even records a dispute over excessive oil for northerners, hinting at tensions over cultural dietary preferences. What emerges is a vivid portrait of culinary identity. These workers weren't passively accepting rations, they were negotiating them, blending Syrian tastes with Egyptian logistics to create something entirely new. Every pork rib, every drop of imported oil, whispers the same truth. The pyramids might be Egypt's icons, but the hands that built them came with palates and traditions, all their own. Beneath the linen wrappings of worker mummies lies a medical mystery carved not in stone, but in bone. X-rays reveal spines twisted by arthritis, knees swollen with the telltale pitting of joint disease conditions far exceeding normal wear. These weren't just injuries from hauling blocks, they were the hidden cost of a grain-dominated diet. Modern analysis shows excessive consumption of emmer wheat, while packed with calories, lacked key nutrients like vitamin D and omega fatty acids. Over decades, this imbalance turned joints into ticking time bombs. Knees that should have lasted 50 years gave out by 35 under the double burden of physical strain and nutritional gaps. The evidence doesn't stop at bones. CT scans of worker mummies from Deir el-Medina show something unexpected: layers of visceral fat surrounding organs, a condition called abdominal obesity. At first glance, this seems contradictory. How could laborers burning thousands of calories daily develop what we'd now call metabolic syndrome? The answer lies in their bread. Constant spikes from high glycemic emmer wheat, compounded by beer's fermentable sugars, created cycles of insulin resistance. Add the inevitable slowdowns during Nile floods when construction paused but rations continued, and you have a perfect storm for weight gain. Yet the ancients weren't blind to these issues. Medical papyri like the Ebers papyrus prescribe remedies startling in their insight. for workers doubled over from digestive pain likely caused by the abrasive sand and fibrous husks in their bread. Physicians recommended figs stewed with cumin. Modern science confirms why. Figs' soluble fiber counteracted irritation, while cumin's anti-inflammatory compounds soothed gut linings. One recipe even specifies green figs of the second crop, showing precise observational knowledge of ripening stages. Dental records paint an equally vivid picture. Worker skulls exhibit not just the expected wear from gritty bread, but abscesses where trapped food particles bred infection. Here, medical texts reveal another clever adaptation: chewed garlic clove packed into cavities as a natural antibiotic. Residue analysis proves it worked. Allicin from garlic slowed decay long enough for some workers to survive infections that would have been fatal elsewhere. Perhaps most telling are the differences between worker cemeteries. Those buried near administrative hubs show fewer signs of nutritional stress, their bones sturdier, teeth less worn. The message is clear: even in illness, hierarchy dictated outcomes. A scribe might receive honey-laced medicines for joint pain, while a laborer made do with willow bark poultices. These medical struggles weren't failures, they were trade-offs. The same diet that eroded teeth and stiffened joints also delivered the explosive energy needed to move mountains. Every aching joint, every abscessed tooth, whispers the price tag of immortality. The pyramids may stand flawless, but the bodies that built them tell a different story, one of sacrifice written in flesh and bone. Tucked away in the corners of worker settlements, archaeologists uncovered something heartbreaking: tiny clay bowls, barely larger than cupped hands, their edges worn smooth by small fingers. These weren't just miniature versions of adult dishes, they were stark evidence of a hidden workforce: children. Analysis of these bowls reveals residue patterns distinct from adult vessels: thinner beer traces, more diluted gruel, and a curious absence of fish bones. But it's the trash heaps nearby that tell the fuller story. Mixed with broken pottery are piles of splintered bird bones, some so small they must have come from sparrows or quail, gnawed clean down to the marrow. The nutritional math is grim. Adult workers received roughly 3,000 calories daily, but children's rations, extrapolated from bowl sizes, provided maybe half that. Yet their bones tell a surprising tale. Skeletal remains show less stunting than expected, with some adolescents even matching the height of elite children. How? The answer lies in those scavenged bones. Isotope analysis reveals wild additions to their diets: traces of Nile clams pried from riverbanks, desert hedgehogs roasted over makeshift fires, even grasshoppers toasted for protein. These weren't random snacks, they were survival strategies. Workers' village layouts hint at organized foraging. Near child-dense areas, diggers found caches of smooth stones perfect for cracking open turtle shells, and fire pits layered with charred date pits, evidence of children supplementing meals with whatever they could gather. One poignant discovery at Deir el-Medina: a child's burial containing a linen pouch filled with dried figs, their tiny teeth marks still visible. This wasn't just hunger, it was initiative. Hieroglyphic training manuals confirm the system's brutal pragmatism. A scribe's exercise tablet lists 10 blows for a boy who fails to collect his quota of river mussels. Yet there's also tenderness. A worker's letter to his son, preserved on pottery shard, instructs him to share your bread with the younger ones, for your arms are stronger. The most telling finds: children's teeth. Unlike adults worn down by gritty bread, theirs show pits from gnawing bones and shells, proof that while the state might have skimped on their rations, it couldn't suppress their ingenuity. These small hands didn't just carry water or mix mortar, they patched holes in the system itself. Every bird bone, every scavenged shellfish, whispers the same truth: childhood in the shadow of the pyramids wasn't just about surviving on half rations, but rewriting the rules of hunger. Even in the rigid rhythm of pyramid construction, the calendar held sacred breaks festivals where the state flipped the script on worker rations. Temple archives at Karnak preserve meticulous menus for these feast days: whole oxen roasting on spits, honey cakes dripping with date syrup, pomegranates split open to reveal ruby clusters. This wasn't just extra food, it was psychological calculus. After months of bread and beer, a single day of roasted meat could reset morale like nothing else. Excavations at worker villages reveal the scale of these feasts. Near the Temple of Ptah at Memphis, archaeologists uncovered a refuse pit crammed with cattle bones, but these weren't the typical scraps. Vertebrae showed precision cuts along the spine, evidence of professional butchers dividing carcasses into equal portions. Unlike everyday rations handed out by rank, these festival meals followed ritual logic. Every laborer, from quarryman to water-bearer, received identical shares. A hieratic ostracon from Deir el-Medina records the math: 1 foreleg per 10 men, 1 rib bundle per 5. The message was clear for one day: hierarchy dissolved in the smoke of roasting meat. The desserts tell an even richer story. Honey cakes, typically reserved for temple offerings, appear in worker settlements during festivals. Residue analysis shows these weren't the delicate confections of elites, but hearty rounds of barley flour soaked in honey and studded with crushed almonds. Some bore thumbprints along the edges, hasty portioning by overseers ensuring no one missed out. At a festival site near Abydos, researchers found clay molds shaped like ankh symbols, used to press these cakes into sacred forms. Workers weren't just eating sweets, they were consuming symbols of eternal life, a subtle reminder that their labor served the divine. Then there were the pomegranates. Imported from Canaan at great cost, these crack-skinned fruits appeared in worker areas only during major festivals. Tomb paintings at Beni Hassan show laborers carefully extracting seeds to share, while trash pits reveal dried rinds repurposed as makeshift cups. The seeds themselves held power. Modern tests show pomegranate juice boosts hemoglobin levels, combating the anemia prevalent in grain-heavy diets. The ancients may not have understood the biochemistry, but they knew the effect. Workers returning to sites after festivals showed fewer signs of fatigue and skeletal remains. But the real genius of these feasts lay in their timing. Papyrus records from the reign of Amenhotep III reveal festivals strategically scheduled before major construction pushes. A spring feast of lamb coincided with the start of block hauling season. A fall date festival preceded the intense carving of winter hieroglyphs. Even the meat choices carried meaning. Beef, associated with royal sacrifice, reminded workers of their connection to the pharaoh's cosmic order. Goat, linked to the god Bain-Jedit, signaled renewal. What's most striking is the contrast between feast debris and everyday trash. Festival refuse pits contain fewer gnawed bones, evidence of abundance, where no one needed to scrape marrow from splinters. Broken beer jars are larger, their residues sweeter, proof of stronger brew for celebrations. Some pits even hold miniature bread loaves, likely ceremonial offerings made by workers themselves in gratitude. These weren't just meals, they were carefully choreographed acts of social engineering. Every bite of honey cake, every shared pomegranate seed, reinforced a truth the state understood well. Full bellies built pyramids, but full hearts kept them rising. Beneath the pyramid's shadow, where the scent of baking bread usually hung thick in the air, silence could be deadly. Papyrus scrolls from the reign of Ramses III crackle with desperate pleas. We are hungry, our stomachs empty, our children weeping. These weren't the whispers of a failing state, but the calculated risks of a workforce pushed to the brink. The so-called strike papyri from Deir el-Medina, preserved in dry desert tombs, document history's first recorded labor strikes, not over wages but over missed grain deliveries. One scribe's frantic note lists workers abandoning tools, shouting, "We have no clothes, no oil, no fish," as officials scrambled to tally missing rations. The timing was no accident. These protests erupted during the chaotic years of late dynastic rule, when Nile floods faltered and bureaucracy frayed, but the workers' demands reveal an astonishing precision. They didn't just clamor for more food, they cited exact shortfalls: 30 sacks of emmer wheat owed from the third month, or 5 jars of beer missing from the scribe's tally. This wasn't blind rage, it was a workforce that understood the system's math better than the scribes themselves. Forensic scrutiny of the papyri shows something even more telling: the strikes always happened at construction milestones, when missing a deadline could embarrass Pharaoh. Workers weren't just hungry, they were strategically leveraging their indispensability. Archaeology confirms the stakes. At the workers' village of Hait el Ghurab, a buried storage jar yielded a macabre find: a mouse skeleton surrounded by gnawed grain husks. Radiocarbon dating placed it precisely during a documented ration delay. The mouse had starved to death inside what should have been a stocked granary. Nearby, a child's burial from the same period contained a clenched fistful of unprocessed emmer wheat, likely scavenged and clutched in desperation, yet the state's response was ruthlessly efficient. Temple archives show that after the Deir el-Medina strikes, grain shipments from royal estates were rerouted within days, but the bonus rations came with strings. Tax assessments from the same period suddenly included new levies on workers' vegetable plots. The message was clear: eat today, pay tomorrow. Even the protest language evolved. Later complaints specified green, fresh onions rather than stored ones, proving workers had learned to demand perishables that couldn't be easily reclaimed through debt. What's haunting is how these crises mirror modern labor struggles. A worker's graffiti at a Luxor quarry sketches a stick figure overseer with exaggerated ears, a mocking nod to officials who heard but didn't listen. Another scrawled hieratic message near a pyramid base reads simply, "The belly rules the stone." For all the precision of rationing, the state's control had limits. Every empty granary, every mouse skeleton, screams the same truth: pyramids rose not just on bread and beer, but on the razor's edge between order and revolt. Putting the ancient Egyptian workers' diet under a modern nutritionist's microscope reveals startling contrasts and a few surprising advantages. Let's crunch the numbers. That daily ration of 10 loaves of gritty emmer wheat bread, 2 jugs of thick beer, and occasional fish provided nearly 4,000 calories, comparable to modern athletes or lumberjacks. But the breakdown would make any contemporary dietitian pause. Fiber intake soared to around 50 grams daily, triple today's average, thanks to the unrefined grains. Their protein hit an impressive 120 grams, mostly from fish, legumes, and beers, suspended yeast akin to a bodybuilder's regimen. Yet this wasn't some optimized meal plan, it was survival fuel with brutal trade-offs. Modern diets, even in physically demanding jobs, typically include varied micronutrients from fruits, vegetables, and fortified foods, luxuries the pyramid builders rarely saw. Vitamin C was their Achilles heel. While occasional onions and garlic provided some, skeletal remains show telltale signs of scurvy, spongy gums and loose teeth in 30% of workers. Compare that to office workers today, who might lack fiber but easily hit vitamin targets from a single orange or handful of berries. The ancient workers' calcium intake tells another story: double today's average from fish bones and dairy, explaining their remarkably strong skeletons despite backbreaking labor. Yet deficiencies lurked beneath these strengths. Without today's global food trade, their diet lacked vitamin and D-rich fatty fish from cold waters, leading to softened bones in workers laboring indoors carving hieroglyphs. Iron was another paradox, plentiful in theory from emmer wheat and lentils, but poorly absorbed without the vitamin C that their limited produce couldn't consistently supply. Modern blood tests would likely reveal widespread anemia masked by their tanned skin. The beer that fortified them also carried a hidden cost. Dental analyses show elevated lead levels from brewing vessels, slowly poisoning the very hands that raised monuments. The real shock comes when comparing satiety. That fibrous, slow-digesting bread kept workers fuller longer than modern refined carbs, explaining how they endured 14-hour shifts. But the monotony took a psychological toll. Papyrus letters complain of dreaming of honey cakes and tongues weary of fish paste. Today's varied diets might lack their caloric density, but the mental boost from diverse flavors likely outweighs the metabolic benefits of their routine. Perhaps the most striking difference lies in microbial health. Residue studies suggest their beer and fermented foods packed more probiotics than a modern yogurt aisle, fostering gut microbiomes that processed their roughage efficiently. Yet modern diets win on safety: no sand grit bread wearing down enamel, no parasites from undercooked Nile fish. This nutritional snapshot reveals a paradox. The pyramid builder's diet could outperform ours in endurance fuel, but failed as sustenance for longevity. Their bones tell the truth, sturdy from calcium but scarred by childhood malnutrition, their teeth strong from wear but riddled with abscesses. It was a diet engineered for monuments, not necessarily for men. Every bite they took was a calculated trade-off between surviving today and lasting decades, a menu written not for health, but for history. The secrets of ancient Egyptian workers aren't just buried in tombs, they're etched into their teeth. Cutting-edge 3D scans of molars from pyramid builders reveal something astonishing. Precise grooves worn into the enamel, some as deep as a millimeter, running diagonally across the biting surface. At first glance, they look like damage from grit-filled bread, but the angle tells a different story. These are straw marks, evidence of a daily ritual so ingrained, it left permanent scars. Workers didn't just drink beer. They clenched straws between their teeth to filter out chunks of fermented bread sludge, sipping for hours like some prehistoric protein shake. The deeper the groove, the longer they'd served. A wear pattern so consistent, archaeologists can now estimate a laborer's tenure by the striations alone. But the real smoking gun lies in the microscopic world. Dental calculus, that hardened plaque you scrape off at the dentist, trapped millennia-old bread particles in workers' teeth like tiny time capsules. When scientists dissolved these crusty deposits, they uncovered flecks of emmer wheat bran, barley husks, even sand grains smaller than a grain of salt. One molar from a Giza laborer held a surprise: intact starch granules from garlic, proving workers chewed cloves raw, likely for stamina or to ward off parasites. Another revealed traces of fig skin, its tiny seeds still wedged in crevices, a sweet snack stolen between hauling stones. The most haunting find, a young worker's premolar with double striations, parallel grooves, suggesting he used 2 straws simultaneously, perhaps to drink faster during short breaks. His calculus told a darker tale: sand-heavy bread residue mixed with blood proteins, hinting at gum disease so advanced it bled daily, yet his bones showed the robust density of a well-fed laborer. This was the paradox of the pyramid diet: nourishment that built strong bodies while slowly grinding teeth to stumps. Modern forensic tools add chilling detail. SEM scans show some bread particles are angular, with sharp edges likely from stones used in grinding that shattered into flour. Other teeth bear microscopic fractures where these shards literally wedged into enamel under pressure, like tiny dental landmines exploding with every bite. Yet in these very same mouths, beer residues coat the grooves, their yeast cells preserved like bubbles in amber. The message is unmistakable: these workers endured pain, but they weren't starving. Perhaps the most poignant evidence comes from the straw grooves themselves, where patterns indicate most workers clenched straws on the right side, suggesting they drank while their left hand was occupied, likely steadying a block or tool. Even refreshment was multitasking. One scan from Deir el-Medina shows a tooth with grooves that zigzag, as if the laborer constantly adjusted his grip amid jostling crowds. These weren't just mouths, they were living tools, their damage a ledger of endurance. So next time you sip a smoothie through a straw, consider this: 4,000 years ago, an entire civilization ran on a beverage so thick, so vital, it sculpted teeth like river rocks, each groove a silent testament to the grit behind the gold. Hollywood would have you believe pyramid builders survived on scraps, a handful of moldy dates, a sip of dirty water, maybe a crust of bread if they were lucky. But the truth lying in the ruins tells a radically different story. Take the infamous scene from a certain blockbuster where emaciated workers pass around a single stale loaf like some tragic game of hot potato. Now compare that to the actual excavation reports from Giza's worker villages, giant ceramic vats still crusted with beer residue, bakeries capable of churning out enough bread to feed an army, and trash pits overflowing with fish bones. This wasn't starvation, it was industrial-scale provisioning. Digital reconstructions based on archaeological data reveal meals that would surprise most modern viewers. A typical worker's daily plate, if you could call a woven reed mat, a plate might hold 3 dense emmer wheat loaves, each the size of a modern dinner roll but packed with twice the calories. Beside it, a clay cup of beer so thick you could stand a spoon in it, more like a nutrient porridge than a beverage, and for protein, not the meager strips of jerky Hollywood loves to depict, but whole salted fish sometimes, even the head, prized for its fatty brain tissue. Forensic analysis shows workers consumed up to 2 pounds of bread and a gallon of beer daily, a caloric intake rivaling Olympic athletes. The real myth isn't just about quantity, it's about variety. Films show laborers gnawing on the same monotonous gruel day after day, but pottery residues tell another tale. One broken jar from a worker's hut near Luxor contained traces of cumin, coriander, and dried garlic mixed with fish oil, evidence of seasoned stews. Another held remnants of date honey, likely used to sweeten bread. Even the bread itself came in multiple grades, from coarse grit-filled loaves for new laborers to finely sifted rounds for skilled artisans. Perhaps the most glaring Hollywood omission, the logistics. Blockbuster scenes show food haphazardly tossed to workers like zoo animals, but ration lists from Deir el-Medina reveal military precision. Scribes recorded every loaf, every jug, down to the quality of onions distributed. A digital recreation of the system shows donkeys arriving at dawn with standardized jars, each marked with volume lines to prevent shorting while overseers checked off deliveries on limestone tablets. This wasn't chaos, it was a supply chain so efficient, modern fast food franchises would envy it. Then there's the communal aspect filmmakers always miss. Tomb paintings depict workers sharing meals, passing jars, even playing Senate during breaks, scenes of camaraderie, not desperation. At the workers' village of Hayt el Ghurab, archaeologists found circular dining pits where teams ate together, their discarded fish bones forming neat little piles, as if someone had tidied up after the meal. Compare that to Hollywood's lone worker huddled over a scrap of bread in the shadows. The most ironic twist, the worker's diet was likely more balanced than that of the elites. While pharaohs gorged on sugary dates and fatty meats, laborers got steady carbs from bread, proteins from fish, and vitamins from onions and garlic. Skeletal studies show workers had fewer cavities and less gout than royalty, their bones stronger from constant labor and calcium-rich foods. That's the ultimate Hollywood irony. The so-called oppressed workers were nutritionally better off than the gods they served. So next time you see a movie scene where pyramid builders collapse from hunger, remember the truth written in their trash. Those heaps of fish bones and shattered beer jars aren't just refuse, they're receipts from history's most successful catering operation, proving once again that reality is stranger and far more fascinating than fiction. Walk through any Cairo morning market today, and you'll witness the unbroken thread of history sizzling on street corners. That steaming pot of full Madame's fava beans slow-cooked with cumin and lemon isn't just breakfast, it's the direct culinary descendant of pyramid builders' protein packs. Modern Egyptian laborers still crack open these creamy beans with the same urgency their ancestors did 4,000 years ago, scooping them up with discs of whole wheat bread that mirror the ancient emmer loaves found in tomb paintings. The similarities go beyond ingredients to the very rhythm of consumption. Just as workers once gathered around communal clay jars at dawn, today's construction crews cluster around full stalls, refueling before the heat climbs. Side by side, the ancient and modern versions tell a story of continuity. Archaeological residue analysis from Deir el-Medina shows workers' full pots contain traces of garlic and coriander, the same aromatics bubbling in today's street food cauldrons. The ancient beans were likely sun-dried for preservation, then rehydrated overnight, mirroring the overnight simmering that gives modern pho its signature creaminess. Even the serving vessels echo across millennia. The shallow clay bowls used by pyramid builders have been replaced by tin plates, but the communal scooping with bread remains unchanged, a tactile link to the past worn into the calluses of every laborer's hand. Then there's the bread itself. Modern Egyptian baladi bread, with its coarse whole wheat and bubbly texture, is essentially a refined version of the gritty emmer loaves that powered the pyramids. Bakers today still score dough with the same diamond patterns found on bread molds at Giza, a technique originally designed to help dense loaves bake evenly. The biggest difference: modern mills have eliminated the desert sand that once wore workers' teeth to stumps, yet the nutritional profile stays remarkably close: high fiber, slow digesting carbs, and enough protein to sustain manual labor. The real surprise lies in the condiments. Ancient temple reliefs show workers dipping bread in salted fish paste. Today's pho is topped with salted pickles and fried eggs. The umami punch that once came from fermented Nile perch now arrives via tahini, but the purpose is identical, transforming humble beans into a calorie-dense powerhouse. Even the timing persists. Just as ancient work crews received double rations during flood season, modern laborers pile extra pho and bread onto their plates before Ramadan's daytime fasts or intense harvest periods. This isn't mere coincidence, it's cultural DNA. When a farmer near Luxor cracks a hard-boiled egg over his pho at sunrise, he's recreating a meal pattern that outlasted empires. The clay pots have become steel pans, the fish paste replaced by chili oil, but the essence remains: food engineered for endurance, perfected across 50 generations. Every bite is a living artifact, proof that while empires rise and fall, the working man's plate endures. So here's the real twist: those gritty loaves and beer jugs weren't just survival rations, they were the ultimate power move. The ancient Egyptian state didn't just feed its workers, it weaponized food with the precision of a master architect. Every calorie was a brick in the pyramid of control, every meal a carefully calculated transaction. Workers didn't receive coins or credit. Their paychecks were baked in clay ovens, their bonuses brewed in giant vats, but this wasn't some dystopian scheme, it was eerily effective. Modern reconstructions show their diet outperformed many medieval or even industrial-era laborer meals, packing enough protein, carbs, and even probiotics to sustain superhuman effort. Skeletons tell the tale: bones thickened by calcium, muscles sculpted by fish and lentils, all fueled by a system that turned grain into literal monuments. Yet behind every loaf lay a ledger: miss a construction deadline, rations shrank, exceed expectations, extra fish or a splash of precious coriander oil might appear in your bowl. Workers weren't just building for Pharaoh, they were trapped in a culinary contract where hunger could be deferred but never escaped. The state's genius was making survival a collaborative act. Those communal ovens weren't just kitchens, they were checkpoints where sharing a beer became both reward and reminder. Your strength fed the machine, and the machine fed you. Now imagine stepping into their sandals for a day. Would you trade your lunch break for a clay cup of thick, yeasty beer and a loaf dense enough to chip a tooth? Could you stomach fish paste under the desert sun, or crave garlic's burn to ward off exhaustion? This wasn't just history's first workforce, it was humanity's greatest balancing act between sustenance and servitude. So we turn it over to you. If you could try one ancient worker's meal, whether it's date-sweetened bread, fermented fish sauce, or that infamous grit-filled beer, what would it be? Drop your pick in the comments and let's keep the conversation going. After all, every bite we debate is another stone lifted off the past, revealing the people behind the pyramids, one flavorful crumb at a time.